The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has held its annual Goalkeepers event in Manhattan, New York. The event, which had the Future of Progress at its theme, underscores the possibility of achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our correspondent, Anwar, who has been made a goalkeeper by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, was at the event in New York and now reports.
7 years ago in this room, world leaders reached a decision, a global partnership that birthed the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. To track and accelerate the progress of these goals across the globe is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's annual Goalkeepers event, which kicks off in this room filled with leaders from around the world and individuals with a common interest in achieving the global goals.
From our previous contribution, we've spent...
The Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, opens up discussions on the importance of access to finance in vulnerable countries.
We are saying and seeing now the combined impact of climate, of COVID, and regrettably now of the war in Ukraine. In order for us to get away from that, we need to secure long-term funding. If we're going to get the SDGs going, we need to be able to have funding that is 30-year funding.
The request for more funding seems to be a step in the right direction as the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, announces his government's commitment to the global goals.
Today, many are worried about how to heat their homes and pay the bills at the end of the month. So governments need to act. We need to act on many fronts simultaneously. But we cannot forget the targets we had set to ourselves for 2030, which is why we need to redouble our efforts. In this regard, I'm so happy to announce that Spain will contribute 130 million euros for the next 3 years to the Global Fund, representing a 30% increase from our previous contribution in 2019.
The co-chair of the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates, connects the dots: climate change, agriculture and malnutrition.
Amazingly, despite low land costs, low labor costs, sub-Saharan Africa still imports billions of dollars of crops every year from all over the world. And that's the reason why the war in Ukraine is now causing a hunger crisis over 6,000 miles away in the heart of Africa. When we lose those food shipments, there's no capacity to grow more food. And it's more than just a market shock. We have malnutrition. In fact, we have the twin challenges of both population growth and climate change that's pushing down the productivity that we have on those farms today.
This year, the Gates Foundation is committing $1.27 billion in health and development, which includes $100 million to combat food and nutrition crisis. And for the CEO of the Gates Foundation, Mark Sisman, collaboration is key.
We're going to be investing in local innovation and global collaboration to help countries strengthen their food systems. As you've heard, fertilizer use in sub-Saharan Africa may fall 30% this year because of their shortages. That translates to 30 million metric tons less food produced, enough to feed 100 million people. So to help address this, we'll support a new effort by African leaders in the private sector to make fertilizer more accessible and affordable. We'll leverage the African Development Bank's efforts to increase food production with new innovations. And, as we've heard time and again this morning, given the disproportionate impact of this crisis on women and children and the need to target women farmers more directly, the bulk of all our investments will be made with gender equality firmly at the top of our mind.
In some countries, governance has been centered around the global goals.
Le Niger, c'est un indice de fécondité.
And in our country, the average number of children that our women have is 7 children per woman, which is an awful lot, which is the highest. Also,
3,9% de croissance démographique.
And we have 3.9% of demographic growth, which is also one of the highest in the world. So my plan is to work on the educational system so that the girls are able, not only for the school to be performing properly, but for the girls to stay in school until at least the end of the cycle.
For the chair of the Gates Foundation, Melinda French Gates, economic progress for women is still stalling worldwide.
One thing has remained stubbornly the same, and that is that institutions, large and small, governments, businesses, even families, the face of power almost always belongs to a man. We are now 8 years away from fulfilling the global goals by 2030. But the most optimistic data that I've seen about this gender goal is that we're still actually 86 years away as a world from fulfilling it. The world has always put gender equality on the back burner, leaving it back there to simmer while we focus on other important crises like climate change or the conflict in the Ukraine. When the world does decide to do something about gender gaps, it treats the symptoms quite often, not the root causes.
The annual Goalkeepers report shows that progress is still possible despite setbacks to global goals. The need to tackle misinformation is important.
Influencers have profound power, which means that all of you in this room have that power. And so choosing to use your voice, to be participants, to try to share accurate information, and also to try to correct things that you may see in your community, or really be a voice and a beacon for accurate information within your space, or to say, you know, we just don't know yet, and that's okay. We're going to wait and we're going to figure it out together, is really the direction that we need to be going, and I think you're all so remarkably positioned to do that.
8 years to the deadline of the UN SDGs. Are the answers still blowing in the wind, or do we have solutions to these problems? World leaders, and indeed everyone, must take action to ensure come 2030, positive changes must be made across the globe. From the Jazz Lincoln Center in Manhattan, New York, Anu Awado, Channels Television News.